Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. Very much appreciated. To members of the public, staff and council, and those that are joining on our live stream, thank you so much for being here this evening. So we're going to be live streaming this meeting as well as audio and video recording it on our town's Innisfil YouTube channel, and it shall form part of the record, which will be retained in accordance to the town's retention bylaw. So we'll open this evening by asking anybody, if you've got your cell phone, please to mute or put it on vibrate. That would be helpful, or if it does draw your attention. And we'll open with our land acknowledgement statement. The town of Innisfil acknowledges that we are situated on treaty land that is steeped in rich Indigenous history. We also acknowledge that this land is the traditional territories of the First Peoples of Turtle Island. It is shared between the Anishinaabe peoples of Beausoleil First Nation, Chippewas of Rama First Nation, and the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation, and we thank them for their generations of stewardship. This meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people, and as settlers, we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. The town acknowledges the forced sacrifices that are the foundation of Canadian society today. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture and committed to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation and respect with all First Nation, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Now, we'll go to item 2, and that is our open forum. We did have no one sign up for our open forum this evening, so we'll go to item 3, which is approval of the agenda for our March 22nd regular council meeting. Could I please have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Richardson and Councillor Zanella. Is there any agenda repair required from the clerk's office this evening?
Thank you, Your Worship. No, the agenda is fine as initially circulated.
Thank you. All those in favor of the agenda as printed? Those opposed? That is carried. Next, I will ask if there's any disclosures of pecuniary or conflict of interest on any item on tonight's agenda. I see none, so I will, if one becomes apparent to you while we're going through the meeting, please make it known at that time, and the clerks will forward the necessary documents for you to fill out and sign. Item number 5 is presentations and petitions, and we're very pleased tonight to welcome the Innisfil Beach Cruisers Car Club here, and Mr. Rick Winson, I think, is going to take the mic.
I will.
Welcome everyone.
Thank you. Your Worship, members of council, thank you for the opportunity this evening to speak. We are representing the Innisfil Beach Cruisers. I'm Rick Winson. Behind me, we have President Linda Newton. Our Vice President Rick Sharples is not with us this evening. We have our Treasurer Doug Campbell, Peter White, John Goodfellow, Jack and Debbie Slaughter, Don and Debbie Luxton, and our photographer, Mr. Walter Rosenberger. We would just like to update what we've been up to lately and what we plan to do in the near future. We have a thank you plaque for the town for the use of the park for the past 6 years. We thank you very much for that. Allowing us to use the park has opened up a massive opportunity to us to raise funds for charities in the town, which we've gone ahead and done. Our attendance has been growing steadily each season, and opportunities for fundraising we've taken full advantage of. Thanks to our members, generous community partners, we've raised and given over $10,000 to various charities, including the Innisfil Community Food Bank, along with hundreds of pounds of food, Christmas for Kids, the Fork and Plate Christmas for Sandy Cove Acres, Candlelighters, Youth Haven, and many others. We've also, well, thank you. We've also joined up with Mr. Rick Sharples to help host the second annual Cookstown Classics for Cancer Car Show, which is held at the Steam Fairgrounds in Cookstown. All proceeds going to the new RVH Cancer Ward, and last year's show drew 400 to 500 cars and raised about $7,000 for that cause. We plan to do that again this year, so thank you for that. Secondly, 6 years ago, the Innisfil Accessibility Advisory Committee made a presentation to council with a 5-year plan to build a world-class accessible park in Innisfil. At that time, fundraising events were discussed, and we decided that we would donate all the proceeds from our members' draw over the past 5 years to that period, to that cause. Unfortunately, we know that COVID came along and took 2 of those years away from us. So thankfully, we had a good comeback season last year. We raised about $3,000 in our final year, so we have a check for that fund for $12,000. We're really happy about that. So from what I understand, shovels are in the ground, equipment is being procured for the park, and we can all be proud of that. I'm really looking forward to that happening. As you know, a young lady on that committee, Kim, is the founding member of that committee. Actually, she's been there for over 22 years. Related to us that she'd never been on a swing in her life. And we decided that we were going to make that happen, and I'm sure that we're going to, and we're really looking forward to doing it. So yeah, $12,000 to Margarita's Champion Park. We're really happy to do that. Going forward, if we're permitted, we're also going to use those funds to help fund the new RVH South campus in Innisfil, if we can. And through your worship, we would like to make that check presentation to, well, we'd like to make it to Meredith Goodwin, but I don't think Meredith is here today. So if Rob Saunders could, seeing he's the chair of the new committee, if you could take that, and Mr. Fowler, if you could take the thank you plaque. If that's okay with your worship?
That is absolutely okay.
We'll take your, any comments or questions you have while we're getting ready to take a picture.
Absolutely. So any questions or comments for any of the committee?
Got away easy.
That was easy. I wanted to say, why don't you put a little plug in for your Thursday nights and...
Well, yes, Thursday nights are going to continue as usual. If anybody'd like, we have our general meeting across the hall tomorrow night. We have one more to go in April, but yeah, Thursday nights commence May the 25th. We'll do a soft opening on the 18th if the weather holds out for us.
Wonderful. And when that one's, maybe we can get all of council to come down for a photo as well?
Absolutely. More the merrier as far as I'm concerned.
Wonderful.
Rick, are you in here?
Thank you for coming. What a great way to start the meeting. $12,000 check. I think we should start all meetings that way. Could we ask for a mover and a seconder, please, that the presentation and donation from the Innisfil Beach Cruisers Car Club be received? Councillor Saunders and seconded by Deputy Mayor Fowler. All those in favor? That is carried. Next, we'll go to delegations from another delegation we're having tonight from town staff. Carolina is going to start us off. Carolina Cotillo is the Capital Planning Engineering Associate, and I'll let her introduce the rest of the team.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council, the public, and fellow staff. I can't compete with the last presentation, obviously, but I am delighted to announce that we are reaching the end of our traffic calming strategy program. This is sort of the culmination of 3 years of work where we, tried to take a look at best practices both in North America and throughout the world, the results of public engagement, and a series of pilot projects in order to develop a traffic calming strategy, a revised traffic calming policy, and a traffic calming program that covers the next 3 years of traffic calming works that we're hoping to put into action. So I don't want to preempt the presentation and steal all its thunder, but I think you'll find it quite interesting. It is a very large document, so we have allowed some time. We'll come back for adoption on the 12th. So I do encourage everybody to take a look at what's in there, focusing particularly on some of the changes to the policy and on that upcoming program that we're hoping to implement. And I hope that you'll be excited as we've been. With no further ado, I will turn it over to our consultant, Mr. Greg Kent from EXP, who's joining us virtually.
Welcome, Mr. Kent.
Thank you. I appreciate the introduction, Carolina, and thank you to Council and Your Worship for having us today to present on this project. We found it very enlightening and interesting, and we had a great team to work with. We had a good working relationship, a partnership, and we were able to deliver what I think is a very good program. Just a note of thanks to the TAC, who was very supportive and provided great information and feedback to us to get to this point, and to Leo Delut, who previously in his director role supported this program and this project to a great extent. That said, we'll move on, and just a quick agenda review. We'll go through about 9 items. We shouldn't be much more than about 10-15 minutes, but we'll take you through the process that we used, reflect on what traffic calming is, talk about the pilots, the feedback from the public, the outcomes, and where we ended up with the traffic calming program and the update to the policy, and how that reflects on really the end goals of what we were trying to achieve in this project. Next slide. So again, our team from Innisfil side, Carolina, Jessica, David, who came out of the project a bit later, but was very instrumental in getting things done, and Andrea Lay, who is now the Director of Planning, supporting this project from the EXP side. Myself, Peter Lougheed was the project engineer, Yassine Benani, our technical specialist, and Jean-Louis Gateau, our stakeholder consultation lead. So when we get down to the project goals, when we started this project was really probably 5 tasks to focus on. But in particular, we wanted to inventory best practices in emergent technology, knowing what was out there, what's currently being used, and what we could draw on to get this project done so that you have the best program possible. In doing so, we prepared a traffic calming design guide that really drives the program from here on in, which was a blend of best practice techniques, forward-thinking technologies, implementation of strategies to address the community needs. And that really spun out into the traffic calming strategy. And from that, we were able to update the traffic calming policy. Next slide. So our approach was all-encompassing. We have an envelope outside program, what's really referred to as a traffic calming strategy. And within that strategy, there's those 3 main pieces that we were looking to achieve. That was the traffic calming design guide, the traffic calming program, and the updates to the traffic calming policy. And to get there, there was a host of things that had to be plugged in. We needed the technical advisory committee's input to really reflect on what the community and the city and the town needed. We had our public open house to get feedback from the public themselves. We conducted a number of surveys. We gathered all the information that Innisfil had for data, which was quite significant. Doing that background review and data analysis with the information that we collected, both from a data perspective as well as the public and advisory committee input. We reviewed those best practices and we conducted pilot projects to see what really did work and did the program as we designed it work so that we could move forward and complete this traffic calming strategy. So next slide. So what is traffic calming? I think pretty much everyone has a pretty good feel for traffic calming, but just to define it, it's really a combination of mainly physical measures to alter driver behavior. You want to get conditions on the road that slow drivers down. It's all about speed. And if you can get them to a lower speed that's comfortable, all users of the roadway are comfortable using it. So that was the target. Those measures basically relate to vertical measures such as speed humps, raised crossing, pedestrian crossings. Those are types of measures that are very vertical. Horizontal measures, anything that makes the road tighter. So delineators, medians, bulb outs, roundabouts, roadway markings, anything to make it feel tighter as you drive through. The whole idea is to make it a little bit uncomfortable so the speeds are reduced. Now, to do that, we had some key objectives, which we mentioned really is to slow down the vehicles, reduce collisions in frequency and severity, increase safety for all road users, in particular, though, the vulnerable road users, reduce the need for police enforcement. You really want these measures to be self-enforcing. Enhance street environment, so you have that comfort level and you want to be in the street, or reduce the cut-through traffic to a lesser degree, and then really increase access for all modes of travel. So next slide. So we'll just talk briefly about the pilot projects, and this was a key element, and I would assume the majority of yourselves on council were able to witness these or have some feel for feedback on these locations. There was 3 of them in all. We started basically with all roads that were under the jurisdiction of Innisfil. And from there, we had to pare it down to 3 locations. So that was what was manageable for this project to implement, as well as to assess and monitor. So there's going to be parts to this slide. So if we can just click on the next. We took all the information that we were able to gather, collision information, all the GIS-based data, and more. So that was the public input, complaints, collision data, volumes, and really the speed data was a key one. All that basically went into a filter. We were able to set up a filtering process that would pump out the best locations for traffic calming based on the data that we had at the time. So if we go to the next click, and that resulted in 5 locations that we identified as the best locations to do a pilot based on that data that we had. And they included from the top to the bottom, Shoreline Drive to the north, then the 9th line, Maple Road, Bellear Beach Road, and Shore Acres Drive. And from there, we picked 3 out of that 5 shortlisted set of locations. Next slide. So those 3 that ended up being the top priority for doing the pilot were Maple, Bellear Beach, and Shore Acres Drive. They were pretty representative of what we were going to get, and they allowed for us to use different traffic calming measures so we could get a feel for different approaches to doing traffic calming so that all different types of measures could be assessed. And then that would reflect on maybe with the best measures that would be used going forward. So Maple Road had lane narrowings based with side street delineators, speed cushions. There's roadway markings. We also had a raised pedestrian crosswalk, and that was at a new PXO that was placed along the corridor. For Bellear Beach, we attempted to use a chicane approach, which basically shifts vehicles from one side of the road to the other side. Gentle movement left to right as you travel down through the corridor. And to do that, we used planters along the side of the road. The last one was Shore Acres Drive. We kept this one very simple, and we only used on-road sign markings. Basically, the markings indicated what the speed limits were along that section of road, and there was multiple placements of those markings. So the test period that we used was basically August to October. It was about a little under 2 months, but it was a long enough time for people to feel it, react to it, adjust. We collected data for two different time periods, one just after it went in and one 6 weeks into the process, to see how people actually adjusted and reacted after they had gotten used to them. Next slide. So just some feedback that we collected from the public on those traffic calming pilots based on an online survey that we conducted, and this was after the pilots had been completed. The different types of traffic calming measures we use is along the bottom of these bars. The bars indicated dark green, strong support, light green, some support. The salmon type color, there was no support. And some people weren't too sure about them completely. So what it really comes down to is combining the green colors together to see what kind of support you got. And for the most part, traffic calming is supported anywhere from 70% to a low of 40%. But chicanes was the only one that had really a low rating. They didn't work quite as well as we would have liked because of the narrowness of the road. But it was a good reflection on what could work and what couldn't work, and was it supported and was it not supported. Overall, we got good support. The ones that had the strongest support, certainly speed cushions, and 2 or more measures placed at the same time, so you double up your effectiveness. But you can see the other measures were equally supported, whether it was lane narrowings, shared bike and pedestrian lanes, and the raised crossing. They all had a positive effect based on the feedback we got from the public. Next slide. So really the outcomes from the program and the study that we had undertaken came down to 3 pieces that I'd mentioned earlier: the traffic calming design guide, the traffic program that's in itself, and the update to the traffic calming policy. So I'll go through those in a bit detail. We'll go to the next slide. So for the traffic calming guide, it provided the guidelines for the review and decision-making process for traffic calming requests. And whether they were a request or they were, which is more of a reactive mode or a proactive mode, where it took all the existing data that city has and start to assess the streets on their own without prompting from a request. The design guide basically sets up the tools and the process to make that happen. Now, you can also apply the design guide to new developments, so green belt developments, new subdivisions. These traffic calming measures that are used in the program can be implemented as part of the design process. So that's key, and that's all part of this design guide. In the end, it provides a toolbox of applicable traffic calming measures that the town can use, whether it is in a reactive, proactive mode or in a new development environment. Next slide. So this took us to generating the actual traffic calming program. And as I'd mentioned, there's different ways to look at identifying locations that are a priority for the city to react to and provide traffic calming measures. The focus in our study, which was a little bit different and innovative compared to most municipalities, it's more of a proactive system where you take the data that you have within the city, and the city has a lot of data that can be used to generate this type of information. And you basically, in our case, we used a GIS platform to take all that data, set up basically warrants and conditions, and screen that data to find out the locations that were most in need of traffic calming. So that really sets the base of the program, and that's where the majority of your locations are going to be identified. And you do that through a warranting process. And then once you've warranted the locations, you prioritize the locations. We really had an emphasis on school presence being an important consideration, so that it rated those higher when possible. We also have a reactive system, and that will come into play later when the program actually starts running. But we've set up the program at this point just as through the proactive approach. We were able to identify 15 locations, and they will be implemented over the next 3 years. As your priority, we've priced them, and you are in a situation where you can start delivering your program right away. Using the reactive system approach, that will take more data input, and that will be run through over the next 3 years, but you have locations now that you can implement. Now, the methodology and implementation strategy, collect the data and the warrant the rest of the locations to the rest of the program. That just continues on what I was saying. You can run the program from here on in to increase the number of locations, and certainly be able to start assessing and developing your funding for those locations. Next slide. So for those years 1 to 3 in which we've pre-populated the program, they are located throughout the township or throughout the town. They're identified on the map on the right. They've been identified on the left. Some of this text might be a bit small, but you can refer to it after. Wherever there's a star on the map is near a school. So basically, there's 5 schools that come into play where this traffic calming will have an effect. It's not necessarily right next to the school, but it's in the vicinity of the school where students would probably or most likely walk or cycle to get to school. So they are spread out, and most of them, again, are along the shoreline, but that's in general where the greater amount of population is, outside of Cooktown, which has 2 locations on King Street. Next slide. So when we talk about the financial side of this program, the majority of the traffic calming that we've identified is more of a temporary nature, where it would be put in and taken out, put in the spring and taken out in the summer. When winter months roll around and you get the snow that you do in Innisfil, it acts as a traffic calming in its own. But it is operationally more intensive because of the nature of the measures. Included in that is paint markings and signage. Paint markings and signage could stay out or it could be removed. Anything like roadside delineators, which are the small posts on the side of the road, or in the middle with a flex stake sign, those would typically come out because they're operational problems for snow clearing. But bottom line, we priced the first 3 years, and they're in that range of 300,000 moving up to 400,000 in the 3rd year. Those are the capital costs. That's the orange line. We've sort of did a projection for 10 years, having the more firm numbers for the first 3 years. That's where we have the locations for. After 3rd year, you would start to identify additional locations by running through the program. The blue is the operational costs. It ranges up to $100,000 generally for a year. And being an operational cost, that is a cost that is accumulates year over year. So that's why you see in red that bar keeps increasing, and it gets fairly high by the end of 10 years. I think there'll be some synergies in your operation side of implementing and removing the measures, and I think those costs will probably come down. But we've basically presented sort of a worst case scenario to get a feel for the 10-year forecast. Okay, so the next slide. So the last piece of this is really the traffic calming policy piece. And we needed to update that policy. You had a policy in place that was originally put in play in 2012, and it related to the 218 Transportation Master Plan. But the conditions of that policy were a bit too strict, and it didn't allow staff to actually implement traffic calming measures. So we have adjusted that so it's more Innisfil friendly. It has been adjusted to recognize the types of speed conditions that were in Innisfil, and it is much more productive in terms of generating locations. And we've witnessed that because we've identified 15 locations off the start that you can initiate to get the program running. Basically, it updated the warrant system, it updated the prioritization system, and it is now more of a proactive system as opposed to a reactive system. Next slide. So that really takes us to where are we now? You have a future program that you can work with. That program, as stated, is proactive. It's data-driven, more data-driven than other municipalities' programs for the most part, but still considers residents' requests and concerns. So that all comes into play. So there's two approaches: proactive, which is the orange and encompasses the whole program, and the reactive requests and concerns from the public, which is the blue section and feeds into the bigger program. Both of these approaches are supported by the Traffic Calming Design Guide, and they're included in the overall traffic program as shown in the graphic. And that is really what constituted the update to the traffic calming policy. Next slide. So when we get right down to it, the end goal is what we were trying to achieve. And basically, when we put this program together and delivered it as a team with staff, we were able to achieve a certain number of things. We forecasted the effects to have increased safety, which we will achieve out of this. We wanted to improve walkability and friendliness of the street, which we will be able to achieve with the addition of crosswalks and medians as well. There is also the side benefit of reduction of noise and pollution levels. So we wanted to see if we could achieve these forecasted effects, and I think we will. In the end, you're basically creating a livable and sustainable community where the citizens feel safe and empowered to use their streets according to their needs. And that really wraps up the presentation. Next slide. Just a thank you, so we can certainly answer questions if there are any questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great to have that presentation here this evening. And I'll go to members of council for questions and or comments. Deputy Mayor Fowler.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just one point of clarification, if I may. You mentioned in the presentation lane narrowing. Were you referring to the flexible bollards that were along Maple at the time, along with the speed bumps?
Yes, that is one measure for road narrowings, is using, we call them delineators or flex stakes. And yes, along with the road markings, that is one approach. And that's what we had used on Maple during our pilot.
Like things like our bike lanes would be road narrowing as well, and the chicanes. And other questions or comments? You have another one, Deputy Mayor? Go ahead.
Thank you again, Your Worship. The one, I'm going to ask a question about cost effectiveness. When it came down to the bollards and the bumps on the humps on the traffic speedy bumps,
Sure.
when you combine them together, I know they're very portable, so we can move them throughout the city. What's the generalized cost per year if we were to use this, including replacements if they get hit, durability, that sort of idea? What are we looking at in dollars? Can you give us an idea there, please?
Carolina, did you want to take that one? Sorry to interrupt.
Through Your Worship, if Mr. Kent wants to go ahead, he certainly may. Otherwise, I'm happy to to answer that as well.
Maybe we can tag team this one, Carolina.
Sounds like a plan. So,
Go ahead, Carolina, you can start.
apologies. So certainly if you take a look at slide 14 in this presentation and at the documentation included in the pricing sections of the report, of the larger report that's linked in the staff report, you will see pricing written out for different types of installations. This reflects sort of what has been presented in the budget to date and what we intend to do moving forward. However, as I'm sure council can appreciate, depending on the nature of the particular installation, that cost and value will vary. Certainly of the 3 pilots we tried, the pilot on Maple, which did have bollards and pavement markings and a raised crosswalk and speed humps, was the most expensive installation. But not all of the installations that are being recommended are as complex or as expensive as that. So it does vary depending on the nature of the installation.
Go ahead, Mr. Ken.
So just to add to that, so there is a capital cost to those speed cushions that we put in place, or the raised crosswalks. As stated, they can be moved around and there's an operational cost associated with that. That operational cost was identified in the cost original term. There's a more significant cost of doing it that way as to putting in permanent speed humps. But we had basically left it as temporary measure so that it could be tried out across the town for the first 3 years so that everyone can get a sense of it and how it works and how it operates. But you can certainly leave it going forward past those 3 years as a temporary measure to move in and out during seasonal conditions, or you can move into a more permanent type solution with a permanent speed hump. You have to take into consideration those who favor them and disfavor them, as well as if that's taken into consideration, you have some fluidity in the program to adjust to fit what Innisfil wants and needs.
Thank you. I'm just going to add to that, I guess, and that is in regards to the reactive portion. So my understanding is what you want to avoid is somebody saying, I want this type of traffic calming. You want them to identify that there's a problem in their area and then have the traffic engineers determine which of the plethora of different measures, which one is the best suited for that particular area. Am I correct?
Through your worship, that is it exactly. We don't want to be acting on an entirely reactive squeaky wheel, gets the grease, they get exactly what they ask for, even if it's not the best application for that location sort of system. So if you take a look at the revised policy, it does lay out the warrants that we'll be using going forward and the methodology for prioritization of requests as they come in so that we can prioritize them fairly with respect to other requests and with the existing program. And also the design guide has been developed in order that we have guidelines as to what types of traffic calming are most appropriate for which circumstances. So that will help us to determine exactly what types of traffic calming to use. And of course, as with any of our programs where we make an initial recommendation in a large document, when we come to detailed design, we'll be revisiting those recommendations to confirm that those are still the best recommendations for those locations.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Councillor Drudge.
Through your worship. So I know that some of these projects you had to go into the roads and drill into them. Have we went back now that spring's rolling around and had a look to see what the implications were to those roads?
So through your worship, we have been monitoring them. People do go out quite regularly. Thus far, everything's been holding up pretty well. I wouldn't be surprised if we got a few minor issues here and there. Certainly, drilling into pavement repeatedly can cause damage to the pavement over time. Thus far, we've been quite fortunate, and I am assured that there are methodologies for installing these that are less damaging to pavement, as well as options for permanent installation, as was previously discussed.
Go ahead.
And when you were talking about the operational costs, were they considered if we had to fix the roads?
Through your worship, we tried to be fairly generous and holistic with those operational costs. As Mr. Kent said, it is intended to be a worst-case scenario, but we didn't want to risk not accounting for certain features. So we did attempt to include as much as we could in those numbers.
Thank you. I have a question more for the engineering team. Do we need to do any work to our engineering standards for new development in order to require them to put in different traffic calming measures when they design a new subdivision?
Through your worship, following adoption of the policy, assuming that it is to council's liking, we certainly will be looking into what impact that may have on our standards. We certainly want to ensure that new development, new roadways take speed management into account. We want to make sure that our operating speeds are safe, are conducive to active transportation, and that is something that we will be looking at with respect to our standards. We will see what changes need to come. That's sort of a next step, but that is something we're planning to do.
Thank you. And just one other question, if I might, and just from past experiences, a certain area meets the warrants and gets, let's say, a speed hump. And then the phone starts ringing and everybody wants a speed hump. How do we make sure that the decisions are data-driven versus giving one to each person who liked that one and wants one on their street?
Through your worship, that is definitely something we're aware of. As staff, we experience that, those constant requests also. I think that the key to that is, following the policy as written, following the warranting procedure and prioritization procedure as written. The intention of those is to force a data-driven discussion that then allows you to have a defensible reason what type of traffic calming you're putting, where you're putting it, and what the prioritized order of those installations is.
Thank you. I'm so happy to see this come to fruition. As the report said, the council in 2019 approved the funding for this project. So it's been a long time in the making. Appreciate all the work through the technical working group and through EXP and all of our staff here. As we all know, this is what generates most of the complaints that we get from residents, and we want to keep our community safe. This document we're simply receiving tonight, so if you're watching online and you want to have a look at it, it will be back to this council on April the 12th, so there's opportunity to go through it. It's quite a hefty document, but you can, I think it's the one appendix that shows the proactive projects, and it also says what is a possibility for the traffic calming in those, I think it was it 15?
Yes.
15 areas. So even if that's just to start to have a look at that, and I'm sure Ms. Cotillo and team would be happy to answer any questions you might have between now and the 12th. So with that, the recommendation is that the delegation and staff report regarding RDS 363, I think that'll be imprinted in my brain forever, RDS 363, traffic calming strategy be received. Moved by Councillor Constantine, seconded by Councillor Richardson. All those in favor? That's carried unanimously. Next is item 7. I'm sorry, Councillor Zanelli, you just reminded me I forgot to bring my card. And I was also remiss in not letting people know that Councillor Waters did send his regrets this evening. So with that, we'll move on to item 7. Is there anyone who would like to report out on any committee that they've sit on behalf of the municipality? Councillor Constantine.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this morning was our first Zoom meeting for the museum and the Boyne. There was a selection for the 2023 Wall of Honor. So that is, they would select an outstanding citizen. I can't say anything more about it right now, but I'll tell you more about it later on. I can't say anything more.
You're sworn to secrecy. I
That's
totally
right.
understand that, Councillor Constantine. And we're very fortunate to have a couple of Innisfil residents on that Wall of Honor. Others? Deputy Mayor Fowler?
Thank you, Your Worship. County Council met last week. We're meeting again this coming Tuesday, and we're inviting all of council to come with us and see us in action. So I'm looking forward to meeting everybody there up in Midhurst. We're continuing with the JIFGAG meetings, the Joint Interim Fire Governance Advisory Committee, that we're still breaking down the numbers and getting down to the nails and tacks of it all. And so far, it looks positive. If things continue, we may have a joint fire service as we do with the police services. Yesterday, we struck our audit committee. So we're looking at making sure that behind the scenes, everything flows as it should with procedurally and otherwise. So everything right now is just, we're moving along steadily and securely. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And also the at County Council, we spent a lot of time talking about paramedics, offload times, that the amount of time that an ambulance has to wait at a hospital. Also, we talked about the having more resources in Alcona, so it'll cut down on our response time for ambulances. They're adding a shift of an ambulance in the Alcona area. Anyone else? Councillor Richardson.
On Monday, we had our library board meeting where we got a really great tour of the digital media lab by one of the staff, Rachel. She did a great job and showed all of the library board members all the great things you can do in that digital media library. So it was great fun.
Anyone else? I have a couple. We had an Empower board meeting this week, and basically it's about a new cost of service application that has to go in very shortly to the Ontario Energy Board, and that covered most of our time. We had a police services board meeting actually today, where we also cover a lot of issues with traffic safety there as well. And finally, I attended my last Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit meeting. I've moved off of that committee for this term of council and received my service recognition award. Being on a health unit during a global pandemic is eye-opening, but that's all I'll say about that. So seeing no others, we'll move to item 7.2. A mover and a seconder, please, for the Ontario Small Urban Municipalities. Councillor Ices and Councillor Drodge. All those in favor? That's carried. Nominations are due shortly. This election will take place in end of April, and I'll let you know how it goes. Next, we'll go into our consent list, and we'll ask for people to pull items that they want to speak further about, but if you just have a question or a comment to make, please just raise your hand and we can deal with it at that time. If there's going to be a lot of debate, we'll move into committee of the whole with it. So just let me know if you want to refer anything into committee of the whole. So we start item A1, special council meeting minutes dated March 1st. A2, special council meeting minutes dated March 8th. A3, council meeting minutes dated March 8th. B1, we had none. We didn't have any reports of various committees, so we'll go right now to the staff reports. So the first staff report, C1, water and sanitary lateral servicing costs. Deputy Mayor Fowler, would you move that one to committee? So I had some questions as well.
Sure. Poll for the committee then.
Thank you. C2, Traffic Safety Advisory Committee appointment in terms of reference. I just wanted to point out on this one that there was a bit of interest in this committee, and I understand this is our community's #1 concern. I was anxious to sit on this just because of we've been working on the traffic safety for so many years and finally putting that to bed, and also a report that we're going to be dealing with shortly, the automated speed enforcement, which has been a passion of mine for many years. So I really wanted to see that come to fruition. But having said that, after things settled in, I'm willing to step aside and let someone else have that experience on that seat if they so choose. Maybe do the first year and then see if anybody's interested in year 2. Next is C3, automated speed enforcement. Councillor Constantine?
I would like to pull that first for the discussion.
Thank you. C4, Pioneer Cemeteries update. It's nice to see how nice they all look now. Great work by staff. C5, Patson Holdings, subdivision assumption. C6, the appointing hearings officers for the town's AMPS policies. C7, the non-union cost of living adjustment. D1, the statement of council remuneration and expenses for last year. Just one thing to bring up there, just a typo in the title. It should be for year end December 31st, 2022. Oh, it says that on the screen, but on my copy of the agenda, it says 2023. E, the bylaws. E1, the bylaw for the collective agreement with Unifor. And E2, a bylaw to reappoint Aird and Burles as our integrity commissioners. There's no correspondence for action, and under correspondence for information, there is the proclamation for World Autism Day on April the 2nd. I will also point out that April 2nd is also World Education and Sharing Day. We do have a proclamation we did share. Unfortunately, wasn't able to get it on this agenda, so we will declare April 2nd as well, Education and Sharing Day, and we will have it on the next agenda on April the 12th. All right, so that is everything. So we'll go back now to the pulled items. So we had C3, C1, C3. Mover and a seconder, please. Oh, Deputy Mayor Fowler?
I pulled it, I just need a seconder for it.
No, we're just, right now, we're just doing the consent list continued recommendation. So Deputy Fowler will move. Councillor Zanella seconds. All those in favor? That's carried. And now we'll resolve into Committee of the Whole. Moved by Councillor Ices and Councillor Saunders. All those in favor? That is carried. And now we'll move to item C1. And Councillor Fowler, or Deputy Mayor Fowler needs a seconder for his item.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm reading this and I'm got one question coming up for in-services directly in regards to this. If you recall a little while back, there was some work scheduled to be planned for Killarney Beach Road with the road redesign and then the water sewer. Is this included? Is this in the design and the 10-year plan for the allowance to be put on the taxes at this moment in time? Or is this something that will be addressed in the future as it comes up?
Mr. Purcell, welcome.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship. The report in front of you right now is for the putting the cost of the water and sewer for the Killarney Road is included as part of this report for property taxes.
Thank you. I had questions, but it was more for finance than for in-services. So Let me just pull up my report here. So I just wanted to clarify that the Churchill Lockhart Road and the 25th Side Road and the 6th line, there were, on the list, there were 4 options: pay in full, partial payment, and put the rest on your taxes, put it all on your taxes over a 10-year period. Or there was an option D, which was no payment at this time and no request to have the amounts added to your annual tax bill. And no requirement to hook up until the home is transferred to another owner. So I noticed that on the Killarney Beach option D wasn't on the Killarney Beach Road piece. Ms. Webb, can you explain why or how?
Yes, Your Worship. So for the second group of properties related to Killarney Beach, so our policy does say that we will give property owners a 3-year advance notice to having to make that decision. And so with the first group of properties, that 3 years has arrived, and we put the options out there, and that included the option D of no payment at this time. For the Killarney Beach group of properties, they received their first notice, I believe it was in 2022. So 3 years has not arrived yet, so they are not required to make a decision at this point. But we have had inquiries from residents wanting to connect already since that main is already operational. And so we've decided to give people the option to lock in their rates and either pay that in full or have that added to taxes in advance of the 3-year notice. When we get to the 3 years, which I believe will be in then 2024, then they'll get that last letter, in which time they have to make a decision, and one of those decisions can be we choose not to pay now and we'll wait until we either connect or the property is sold.
Thank you very much. I think there was some confusion around that particular item. So there was a public meeting back, I'm not sure when it was, but there was some very boisterous residents who were there. Actually, the meeting was to do the design of the road, but most of them had questions about their bill, because I guess they just received before that their letter with the options on it. So I just wanted to bring that out tonight, that we do have that option, that if you like your well water, you have a decent, safe, potable water from your well and can't afford or do not want to pay for that hookup, you have the ability not to do that. But once the house is transferred into a new ownership, that owner then is required to do it. But I think it's helpful to have that policy. We've had situations in the past where we've had, an older retired couple on a fixed income who've lived in a house for 50 years and not able to pay the dollars required. So it's been a nice fourth option for those. Of course, it is nice not to have to worry about wells and be hooked up to municipal water and not have to worry about how much you use or getting it tested regularly, knowing that the town is taking care of that for you. But there is that option for the people on Killarney Beach as well. So I just wanted to point that out. The only other question I had, and I didn't give any advance notice, so I don't know if it's fair, Ms. Webb, but how many non-responses do we typically get? I'm thinking of the first group there with in Churchill and Lockhart.
With the first group, I believe we had 5 non-responses.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else have any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? I believe we had a seconder, didn't we? It was Councillor Drodge. Yeah. All those in favor? That is carried. Any opposed? Seeing none. All right, so then we'll go to item C3, which, Councillor Constantine, if you could ask someone if they would second that report for you. Okay, so if you just turn your mic on and let people know who the seconder is.
Robert Sanders. Councillor Sanders.
Thank you. Go ahead, questions, comments?
On my campaign trail, the number one issue in Ward 2 was traffic safety. I would ask how many residents feel about automated speed enforcement cameras. There was no objection from the residents, and they believed that it was a good idea. The first time I met with the mayor, that was one of my suggestions. So I am in support of the recommendation for this report.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions or comments on automated speed enforcement? Deputy Mayor Fowler?
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a few of them as I was going through the report. I understand that Barrie will be the processing center initially. Under the Ford government, they're giving them the ability to do so. The question is, how will this relate to our administrative monetary policy? Like, are we getting a percentage of the fine? If so, how much are we looking at?
Thank you, Ms. Bowman.
Through you, Your Worship. Yes, so the City of Barrie is looking to set up the Joint Processing Center. Because it's a provincially governed offense through the Highway Traffic Act, all of the tickets written from the camera flow through the Barrie courts, should that be the model we choose to proceed with. The alternative model is an administrative penalties model, similar to AMPS, but designed to govern provincially regulated issues like the Highway Traffic Act. So as we start, the likely outcome is to go through the Barrie courts, and similar to other tickets and things that they process, they return those fines to us, less court fees and administrative fees that they take that serve to fund the administration of the court.
Okay, I'm asking, I apologize, I'm asking for more of a hard number. Are we looking at between 15, 20% of the ticket? Are we talking 25 to 30? Or even more broadly, like even anywhere between 15 and 50? Just a general idea, please.
Ms. Bowman?
Through you, Your Worship, I have to admit I have been unpacking this for us, well, we're in the months. And as the Mayor knows, this was a very complicated topic. So our recommendation to Council is to take this first step of acknowledging LAS's request of us and beginning to walk down that road. And we're going to be very excited to come back to you with more of a thorough analysis looking at all of the expenses related to this. There are expenses, there are revenues. I wouldn't be able to tell you that number today, but would be delighted to give you the full business case in the next report.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, I'm so excited to see this come forward, and I'm so excited to be the first customer, to have that ability to be the first one to sign up. I think is wonderful, although it does come with its challenges as well. As the Deputy Mayor has said, we're kind of walking into a little unknown land, but the number one idea here isn't about making money. The number one idea here is about making our streets safe. And we have so many commuters, not just commuters, but people who commute through Innisfil who don't live here, who have less respect for our roads and our safety than maybe people who live here do. And this is, I think, a way to make them understand that when they drive through Innisfil, they better pay attention. So yes, but it's going to come with some growing pains. There's no doubt when you go first, there's things to learn. I think moving forward, I think if going through the Barrie courts is a necessary evil at this time, but getting the APs processed, I think will be huge for us. The other thing I wanted to point out in the LA letter from LAS is that they have some long-term plans for us as well, or asks for us. They say in the longer term, LAS would work with the town of Innisfil to achieve the following objectives. Would work towards becoming an additional processing center for this service, whereby LAS would financially support the startup and operating costs of such a venture. They're willing to invest financial and legal resources required to set up the Joint Municipal Services Board with the town and other like-minded municipalities to govern and create consistency across all the processing sites. And the town of Innisfil would be a founding member of the Joint Municipal Services Board and recognized by LAS as a leader in the sector for this type of service offering. So if we do decide to participate in this longer-term relationship, they would work with us. And I think, well, LAS is, I should have described that first. So LAS is Local Authority Services. It's an arm of AMO. It's the not-for-profit arm that develops and does shared services for municipalities to try to keep costs down. And I can tell you, I have been banging on their door for years now, so I'm so glad to see this day come when we can move this forward, because I really think this is going to be a game changer, not just for us, but for every municipality, because I can tell you that of the 444 of us, there is not one, well, maybe one. There's a little island, Coburn Island, the municipality of Coburn Island, and they have a population of 0. So that would probably be the only place that doesn't have traffic safety as their first complaint. So I just want to really thank Ms. Bowman. I know that this has been such a lot of work, so complicated, trying to deal with the City of Toronto and MTO and lobbying the government to make these changes. So thank you so much to you for making this happen, because really it has been on the wish list for so long, but just such an enormous amount of work. It just was so hard to get it moving forward, and I really appreciate all the work that you put into it. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship, and we'll take those thanks, but I'd like to extend them certainly to the team behind me who's been supportive across departments, legal, bylaw, finance, IT, and engineering.
Thank you to all of you. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you very much. And that takes us to our rise recommendation. So moved by Deputy Mayor Fowler and seconded by Councillor Constantine, that we now rise and return back into formal council. All in favor? Those opposed? That's carried. And next we will go to adoption of the recommendations from the Committee of the Whole, and I'd ask for a mover, please. Councillor Drodge, Councillor Richardson, all those in favor? That is carried. Is there any notices of motion? There is none received. So we'll move to announcements. We'll go first to Ward 1. Councillor Ices, no announcements, Councillor. Ward 2. Councillor Constantine, did you have any announcements this evening?
Just a reminder about the GoFundMe page for the Lefroy United Church. So if you would like to contribute, please just go to the GoFundMe page.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ward 3.
Just a couple quick things. On Saturday, April 1st is the Innisfil CD Saturday at Lakeshore. They also have a program going called After the Bell, that's for teenagers, on Fridays from 3:30 to 4:30 at the Lakeshore branch in the Innisfil Idea Lab. It also counts for community service hours. They also have coming up on March 24th, Home Alone First Aid for Seniors, that's through Contact Community Service. They also Moon Cafe Craft and Beer, located in Ward 3, has karaoke on Wednesday nights and trivia on Thursday nights. And then lastly, only because Councillor Water is not here, on April 2nd at the Lions Hall, there'll be kids bingo from 11 till 1.
Thank you so much. Councillor Ward 5. Councillor Zanella. Thank you. Councillor Ward 6, Councillor Saunders. Do you maybe want to let people know about the Lockhart Road?
Sorry, yes, there's a hearing tomorrow with the announcement with the extension of Lockhart Road with the construction and the water treatment that's going to be done. That'll be at the Wheel tomorrow night between 5 and 7, and all the public and any council member want to go, they can go and ask any questions, and I'll be there. I know the town will be there, and Park Bridge will be also there to answer any questions for everybody that wants to go.
Thank you, sir. Councillor Drodge.
The Tanger Outlet Mall this weekend is doing a Hockey Hall of Fame exhibit from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. So anybody that's a hockey fan can go check that out.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. This past Saturday, I was cordially invited down to Bradford for an interfaith symposium on religion and mental health by the Ahmadiyya Muslim Society. That was actually very interesting. We had an upstanding member of the community from the Sikh community. We had an imam. We had a Christian pastor, the South Simcoe Police. It was a great discussion on supporting each other during times of crisis and the various ways we can do it. It was a very welcoming day. This past Monday, we had our town of Innisfil had their first Ramadan celebration at Town Hall in these very chambers. We learned all about the significance of Ramadan, the fasting, and quite a bit of information. It's actually very, very welcoming, very welcome community, and I believe today is the first day of Ramadan officially, so Barak Ramadan, I believe I say it correctly. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Deputy Mayor. I just wanted to congratulate, we had a swearing-in ceremony for our new Chief of Police that many of us were able to attend, and I'm very happy to see him in that role. It's been a great week for the RVH South Campus. We had an exciting announcement at Horodinsky Farms where $1 million was donated to this South Campus. This is the second $1 million donation from Mr. Horodinsky after donating $1 million for our Rizzardo Health and Wellness Center. And I also want to thank the very brave people who took the plunge at Friday Harbor, as all of that money was also sent to the RVH expansion. Councillor Zanella and Councillor Constantine, and I believe I can't remember who was all there. I'm talking about the Lakehead University cybersecurity event, which was, I believe it's Councillor Waters was as well. Yeah. So it was put on and sponsored by our very own economic development group, put on a cybersecurity talk at Lakehead University, and it was very educational as well. There are some information sessions on April the 20th, and I wrote that down and I have no idea what it means. Can somebody help me?
Mayor Dolan, that is the employer information session for workers at the library.
Thank you very much. Yes, so it's at the Innisfil Idea Lab and Library. It's put on by the Ontario Workers Advisors Group. So it's pertaining to if you know someone, or if you have been injured at work and aren't unionized, or if you having an issue where if you feel that you've received, if you've identified a workplace issue and you feel that maybe you've been, what's the word I'm looking for, penalized for doing so, then there's going to be an information session put on by our own Pauline Miles, she is an advisor with the Ministry of Labor, and I believe it's from 5 till 6:30 on April the 20th. Earth Day is also April the 22nd at the library. There's registration required, and also there will be on the same day a Town of Innisfil Volunteer Appreciation Day. So keep an eye on social media for that. March 29th, the YMCA has a Fill the Bus campaign. They're collecting money at the Foodland in Stroud, and it's for trying to, or subsidizing kids so that nobody, I'm gonna start again. Nobody is turned away from camp because they can't afford to go to camp, that any child who wants to go to camp can. And they'll be there all day collecting Fill the Bus donations at the Foodland. And finally, on April the 4th, there'll be a virtual open house for our facilities master plan. Anyone else have any other announcements? Great, seeing none, we'll move to the confirming bylaw, and that would be moved by Councillor Constantine and seconded by Councillor Zanella. All those in favor? That's carried. And adjournment, record, I think, moved by Councillor Drodge and seconded by Councillor Richardson, that the meeting be adjourned at 8:15 p.m. All those in favor? Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you again on April the 12th for our next regular council meeting. Good night.